antifreeze leaks from a car and animals drink it. It's an attractive nuisance, right? There's something that seems better. It is sweeter. So their brain is tricked into believing this is more beneficial. It's easier. It's there. I didn't have to work for it. Let's get it. And they die as a result, right? It's the same with swimming pools that, don't have fences around them. Little kids go to them. And, it's these same things happen all over the place economically. This is really what Web 2 is. We lost the distributed state of the original web, where we were all sort of homesteaders and proprietors. We had terrible, kludgy little websites that we tapped out in text editors. They were not beautiful, but they were ours. The servers were, under our desk, or whether it's at a university or at your home. And bit by bit, we made the barriers to entry lower. We created greater opportunities for inclusion for people who lacked access to the resources or the computation or the technical know-how to do this. But people exploited that imbalance of power, right? And they constructed what they believed in their heart, truly believed, was a force for good in the world. See, for example, Google's original "Do No Evil." But over time, as it corporatizes, as it iterates within itself, it begins to decay, because this is the same with our governments. This is the same that we're seeing today. The stewardship of a society is a constant drain on hours, on sort of psychic energy. You have to constantly be working, getting out of your bed, trying to make things better in a small way, just to keep things the same, because the forces of entropy are tilting us toward decay, and the nature, human nature and corruption, tilt us toward that decline. I do think that this distribution and this explosion of choices is likely. What I am concerned about, will remain concerned about, is the first mover advantage, the network effect, and particularly anti-competitive behavior by market leaders and by those who have a lot of resources. And this is just sort of the concern. What we see, I think, in a lot of these spaces is where regulation, or the regulatory authority, or a advantage of any kind like that, an unshared advantage, is used to advantage a certain class to the detriment of their competitors, whether we're talking about states versus non-states, whether we're talking about market incumbents versus market entrants, whether we're talking about startups versus whatever. We all recognize this. We all see this. And there's just a question that I would have for Gavin with this to bring it all back is, I'm going to presume that you grant that, because I think it's reasonable. The question is, recognizing that, particularly in technology, there is this tendency toward winner takes all. And if we presume those who have unfair or unreasonable advantages, whether we're talking legal or, as you say, illegal, because it cuts both ways, some ways in interesting forms, how do you guard against the natural tendency towards centralization of reward, when we have, for the first time, sort of just a hand on the string that we hope can help us climb out of the well of this toward a more decentralized, or a more distributed apportioning of power?
Well, I'm not sure if this is something that can be. This may well be above my pay grade. Fair enough. Power, I can't solve what is inherently an issue with humanity.
True, and none of us can. Just to be clear, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. This is just thinking out loud, right?
But I think, so that I would say that there are two things that, broadly speaking, can reduce the issues that come with individuals having outsized power. One of them is transparency. So I just to put it there, I don't think that a world where everybody has literally the same amount of power is necessarily a world that we would want to live in.
Sure.
Right? In the same way that we don't necessarily want to exist in a world where everybody has a vote over what the world should be like. Governance is a fundamentally unsolved problem.
Right.
But I think transparency and I think incorruptibility of rules. So if we have, if the rules are transparent and if we know that they are blanket enforced, then this at least keeps those that have more power than others in check. So in my mind, this technology can help in so much as it avoids egregious corruption of the rules that is only really possible in these very opaque power structures, some of which that you were mentioning earlier in the US government.
Fair enough.
Edward, I think you were trying to make a couple points in there, and I wasn't quite sure if you were able to get them through. Would you mind restating them? Because I wasn't sure I heard anything out of your mic. Gavin.
I was just saying with Gavin's point. Actually, I think he is correct in a certain way. We don't necessarily want everyone to have exactly the same power, or if we do, we want to encourage coordination and cooperation, joint construction over sort of a anti-collaborationist model for the whole world. It's just a question of when we recognize that there are these centralizing forces, right? There's these centers of gravity that will naturally come to exist in any competitive space. How do we sort of ensure fairness in a world where people are taking very anti-regulatory positions? Because classically, right, when we're talking about the centralized authorities, you've got regulators. But what happens when the regulators don't act or act corruptly, right? Or we move to a space where we don't have the benefit of them at all. That was the question widely. But I think Gavin's made his point, and we're good on that.
Great. We may not have a sensibility of what it looks like in 10 or 20 years exactly, but is it fair to say that it looks potentially better? Is that fair to say? Is there consensus on that? If the world is truly adopting Web3 under sort of our collective imagination of what a Web3 adopted world looks like. Are we agreed on that?
So for my part, I certainly wouldn't be spending my life, 14 hours a day every day building this if I didn't think it was going to be an overall positive thing for the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a good thing for the world if we make it so. And that's really my point. For everybody out there who uses these networks or who's interested in this or who thinks there's going to be an impact or is threatened by it, the only way things change is if you make them change. Like Gavin says, his 14 hours a day, that counts for something. That is a measure of influence. We all have influence, whether we apply it, whether it is applied correctly through our efforts, or whether it's sort of stolen from us and manipulated and shaped through these outside parties that are influencing us or our thinking or whatever. That's a battle that we fight every day, and we continuously will. When we talk about Web3, one of my primary concerns, just beyond the sort of inevitability of the space, and I think we will see a growing importance here, and I think that can be a tremendously positive force. I am afraid of, as always, the corruption of privilege that exists within these spaces.